This Fleet Equipment Unscripted interview is presented by Hendrickson, a leading manufacturer of heavy-duty suspension systems and components to the global commercial transportation industry. Visit hendrickson-intl.com to learn more.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Morgan, editor of Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted. Today, we're talking with Nate Zambon, director of Filterminder at Donaldson. Nate, thanks for taking the time to join me.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate the opportunity.
So really cool, I guess you would call it telematics, data built-in system here into the components. Filterminder Connect for the engine air filtration has been available for some time now. Can you bring us up to speed on an idea of how on-highway fleets are using that product? Any unique insights that they've gleaned from that engine filtration data?
Yeah, great question. So I think one of the really cool things we've seen with how fleets are using the information is, especially if you think about yourself as a fleet that has different, a mixed use of trucks, right? So maybe you have some over-the-road applications, maybe you have some heavy-duty applications. How do you really optimize maintenance on your air filtration system? And one use case we found that working closely together with one of our fleet customers, they had some cases where, hey, we want to change our air filter, once a year, right? So, we're running the testing with them for a while, and they came to this change interval, and they said, "Gosh, why does it say there's so much life left remaining in the filter? Is something wrong with your analytics?" And we said, "Well, hey, tell you what, to help build confidence in the system, let's send the filter back to us. We have all the filtration test labs. We actually tested the filter, and in that case, there was over 80% of the life remaining in the air filter. So a tremendous amount of remaining life left on the filter. And I think the fleet was very surprised to understand that, hey, there's a tremendous opportunity to extend these drain intervals, maximize the life, reduce some of those maintenance costs. So that was one. But then the interesting thing, in the same fleet, they were having some other issues where there was an alert going off, and they're saying, hey, we haven't even hit this year threshold yet. What's going on there? So same type of thing, where now instead of being able to get to that year, they were actually needing a filter replacement much sooner. So in that case, really what they were able to do is utilize the data to say, okay, instead of these time or distance-based intervals, let's let the data speak and really optimize when to do maintenance based on when it's actually needed, right? So if you have a truck that's maybe in a higher dust environment or gets a little bit of off-road work type thing in it, those truck filtration systems really aren't built, say, like an off-road piece of equipment. So then how do we optimize maintenance in those different use cases, I think has been something that's been really interesting. So to kind of summarize, one is, opportunities to, potentially get more life out of the filter, but then two, how to use data to, kind of make it easier to manage, different use cases of your equipment. So those are some of the big lessons learned that we've seen so far.
Right. Well, I love that you called out the, I think you had mentioned building confidence in it, right? Saying, hey, I should be able to get more out of it. But the fact that the fleet didn't take it on face value, which I think is a common thing with technology, right? There's a level of trust, especially as we start talking about some of these forward-looking things like prescriptive maintenance and predictive maintenance. It kind of, one, we have to tear down our own assumptions, and then two, we got to trust the data. Was that like a long process, or was it a one time? Like, did you have to keep validating that and to build trust, or like, how much of a climb is this in your experience?
I think say within a particular fleet, you don't need to do it repetitively or continually. You can start to build some case studies, and then once you build that with one fleet or a couple fleets, and you can start to share that with others, right? And I think, as people kind of see some of the same things happening in their fleet, they're able to say, okay, that matches kind of what these guys went through, and I can adopt that in my fleet. So, on the air filtration side, I think there's good willingness to, evolve their maintenance practices. I think it's just, how do we kind of build out that data set that gives me the confidence to do so, right? So.
Right. Super interesting. So now that was air filtration. You're bringing that over to oil conditions, right? That same data and insight in the oil conditions. What advances on your technology side did you need to make to be able to bring this to the fuel and oil conditions?
Yeah, so oil is, I would say, pretty complex, right? So, if you think about the sensor, right, the sensor is measuring 5 different fluid properties, plus you have engine data, and there's a lot of when we think about oil, there's kind of 2 buckets. One is, very simply, when do I need to change oil? So when is oil at end of life? So that's kind of one, say, problem to solve. Then the next problem to solve is, is there anything in the oil that's related to contamination in the engine, right? So maybe, an EGR cooler went bad, or there's a fuel system issue and you're getting fuel dilution in your oil. So it's, kind of a couple different detection problems you're trying to solve or identify within the oil. So when we think about oil, all of the analytics development and the understanding of how, what are we getting from, the truck from a data perspective, and how do we boil that down into something simple from a fleet perspective, right? Because what we've boiled it down to is, if you're a fleet manager, you're getting inundated with, just a tremendous amount of data. And, they don't want to have the burden of, trying to decipher and translate all of this, right? So we've taken that on our shoulders and said, okay, we're going to give you a very simple kind of green, yellow, red scheme, right? So green, you're good, do your business, everything's well. Yellow, you're starting to approach something, so we can start thinking about, okay, when's a convenient time to do some of these service events? And then red is, okay, we need to take action. So for us, it's really been about building, kind of two things. One is the intelligence behind all the sensor data. So it's really, okay, with all this data that we're getting, how do we then translate that into these green, yellow, red alerts? And then the second one is, if you think about on the air filtration side, most air cleaners have a port where you can thread in an air sensor. So the installation is extremely easy. It just takes, literally seconds. On the oil side, these sensors don't exist on the trucks, right? So, it's the developing the sensor, it's getting the validation between the sensor outputs and oil analysis. We've done a tremendous amount of that work to validate the quality of the sensor data and the analytics behind it. But then it's also, where do you integrate the sensor into the engine, right? And to make it really easy and reliable, Donaldson's leverage our engineering teams. We've developed different kits for the different engines. So, exactly which hardware do we need to go into the engine? And then it's not just, okay, we designed it. Donaldson is, a technology leader. So how have we gone through all of the validation from a reliability perspective and a durability perspective, subjected to all the, heavy, harsh environments that a, truck and off-road piece of equipment is expected to live towards, right? So, just a huge amount of effort into, really integration of the sensor to make that really easy for the customers. And then once we get all that data and we have a reliable installation, how do we translate that data and then provide that back in a very simple, actionable, easy to understand perspective? So that's been, we're predominant amount of effort. We have a tremendous amount of teamwork happening here, as well as with some partners that we're very appreciative of for helping us guide us along that journey.
Right. So, okay, we've already kind of touched on building confidence with these systems and use cases in this. On the engine oil side now, though, as you point out, you are tracking a lot of things here, and even just talking about it now, I mean, you got engine oil density, you got the viscosity, you got the quality of it, right? It almost sounds as if it's like a real-time engine oil analysis, right? I mean, a manual process that you would bring the truck into the shop, take the oil sample, send it out, wait for the oil sample to come back. How much on par is the analysis of what you're doing with Filterminder Connect in relation to that standard analysis process that fleets know? I mean, is this a substitute for it, a supplement for it? How can they reconcile that with what their normal process is?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we see is right now it's a great way, because one of the challenges with oil analysis is that you do need to pull the truck into the shop. Depending on say the quality of the sample taken, you're relying on one data point to make a lot of inference about what's happening with the engine or what's happening with the oil, and that can lead insights astray to some extent, right? So right now, where we see is, in terms of quantifying oil degradation, the monitoring solution does a pretty good job, right? And because you're getting real-time data continuously, right? This is, every 15, 30 seconds, we're getting more and more and more data. So you can really start to understand how things are trending with the oil and start to be able to predict when things are going bad. So it really makes it easy from that perspective. One of the things we see right now is, as we get to these, threshold points where we say, hey, this is, at a point of, yellow, right? So service soon. We definitely encourage our customers to continue kind of this validation journey to let's get an oil analysis to confirm that, right? Or when we hit red points, let's get an oil analysis. And that's, we view that as kind of this confidence development cycle that we're going through. So we think it's kind of a very nice, partnership between oil analysis and real-time oil condition monitoring. Of course, as as confidence continues to grow and analytics development continues to take place, potentially long term could very well be the kind of the new solution from an oil analysis perspective. But we definitely view oil analysis and say the measurement accuracy, the quality of that data, we consider that to be the source of truth still. And there is a kind of a thoroughness with an oil analysis that is hard to recreate from a cost-effective perspective on the machine. So we view very much as kind of supplementary right now. And obviously we think about our analytics and our solution offering is very much an iterative approach, right? So we put an analytics model out, we continue to get more data and enhance it, and it's a progressive thing. So that's really the approach we're taking internally.
Right. No, and I mean, it's an interesting point you bring up here. If you kind of take it as like a system agnostic approach, and you say, okay, well, you were doing used oil analysis, let's say twice a year, and your first point was up here, and you're good, and your second point's down here, and that's all you know for the year, right? But now, as you have these supplemental data points, and you can start to see it, right? And you can connect those dots a little bit more. Yeah. And as we've seen, engine manufacturers help fleets push oil drain intervals out to like really almost astronomical mileage numbers, right? Just having that peace of mind of kind of at a glance kind of look is super valuable. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Are you is that something that come out and fleets can see that, or is that part of the coaching process as well then of kind of showing the plot points and how that works, or is that something people can latch on to pretty quickly?
Yeah, so we one of the nice things we spent a lot of time is, if you think about the user interface and the user experience, how do you really boil all of that complex information down to something very simple? And we give that information to them so that they can see that trend, but it's simplified in a way that someone can say, if they get an alert saying, hey, you're approaching a service interval, they can quickly look at the supporting data behind that and say, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? It's clearly we're approaching this service limit, and you can see how things have trended over the past, weeks or months or whatever the time period is in that case.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you mentioned the red, yellow, green kind of thing, which is very familiar. Fleets have seen that on the service side here. So a good understanding of that. Mm-hmm. Good to know kind of the basis behind it for how that gets done. Right.
Yep.
Nate, really appreciate you taking the time. This is super interesting. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon as we kind of chart the development of all these data components coming into all the nooks and crannies of engine development.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jason. Really appreciate the opportunity.